right here on QLTV. My name is Jay Sanin. I'll be your host tonight. And of course, unlike Jeffrey Tubin, I will be courteous enough to wait until the show's over and my laptop is closed before I disrobe this evening. Of course, I'm referring to CNN's Jeffrey Tubin, who had a very embarrassing nudity related moment on a Zoom call at work not too long ago. Fortunately for him, that's not the most embarrassing thing that's happened on video over the last week because I went 0-4 on my NFL picks back on Thursday. Much more embarrassing. You're very welcome, Jeffrey, for bailing you out there. On the show tonight, we will recap those abysmal NFL picks in a segment we call Upon Further Review. We'll talk about what we learned in the NFL this past week during week 6 in a segment that I cleverly call What Have We Learned? We'll also update the GBI show official power rankings. And if you're good, if you're on your best behavior, you stay till the end of the show, I will get you an early pick for NFL Week 7, which, based on the results of this past week, you might want to go and do the opposite of. That's completely up to you. But we'll get you all that and a whole lot more, maybe some laughs as well here on the GBI show tonight. That's Gridiron Betting Insights right here on QLTV. Of course, tonight's show brought to you by BetQL.co. Use BetQL.co to do a better job betting than I did this past week. Over 10,000 simulations of every game on the NFL schedule each week. They give you projections on what the point totals will be for each team. They give you the halftime numbers as well. Of course, you can apply those numbers, see where they fall in line with the spread, the total, all that fun stuff. Find some value in the NFL betting markets. Again, don't be like me last week when I went 0-4. Use BetQL and beat the books on week 7 and beyond. Use promo code Sanin for 20% off all subscriptions at BetQL.co. Of course, if you want to weigh in during the show, if you want to make fun of me for my appearance, for my picks, or anything else, or if you just want to let me know what you think of the games from week 6 or looking ahead to week 7, go ahead in the chat box on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching. Of course, we appreciate you so much being a part of the GBI show here tonight. So we will start tonight's show with the way we start every Tuesday show, with a segment where we talk about what we learned the week before in the National Football League. It's a segment that I like to call, What Have We Learned? And the first thing we learned in the NFL in week 6 is that the Dallas Cowboys are in some real trouble. There was some speculation. Of course, Dak Prescott goes down. Nobody was sure just how bad it would be for the Cowboys with him out. There was a lot of talk from pundits and idiots like myself who said, Andy Dalton's like one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. How bad could it possibly be? Well, we found out on Monday Night Football just last night, the answer was really, really bad. The Dallas Cowboys went out there and they got destroyed. They got mollywopped 38-10 by the Arizona Cardinals at home on Monday Night Football. Now, the Dallas defense was bad, but we expected it to be bad. It's been bad all year. The problem for Dallas now is they do not have the offense to keep pace with their bad defense. Andy Dalton goes out there, scores 10 points. And of course, there are some extenuating circumstances. There was the missed pass interference call that led directly to an Andy Dalton interception. Zeke Elliott fumbled the ball 2 times, really not under too much duress, in a couple of one-on-one situations. Really, really bizarre stuff. But it's not as if the Cowboys were doing great offensively aside from those sort of out of the ordinary plays. They were absolutely demolished on that side of the ball. Pressure getting after Andy Dalton constantly, despite the fact that Chandler Jones, the best pass rusher on the Arizona Cardinals, was out for that game and will be missing for the rest of the season. So that's really concerning, because what that tells you is the offensive line, as currently constructed with all of the injuries, not good enough to protect Andy Dalton, and Dalton lacks the mobility of Dak Prescott to get out there and extend plays and make up for the shortcomings of that offensive line. Now, we mentioned the fumbles by Zeke, and it's a situation where I don't think you should go Adrian Peterson with him, where you're not putting him on the field in passing situations. But there are more opportunities for you to get Pollard on the field at running back for the Cowboys. Again, this is not a call to bench Zeke or anything like that. It really doesn't have anything to do with the fumbles. You could just use your 2 backs more efficiently. And I get it, you paid Zeke, so you feel obligated not to. But there are some real problems with the way I think the game is managed, not just by Mike McCarthy, but by Jason Garrett before him, just with the way that things are structured there in Dallas. And now you see that institutional rot really causing problems, again, because you don't have a guy like Dak Prescott to bail the Cowboys out of this situation. Now, what does this mean going forward, right? Because we're talking about this from a sports betting perspective. If you have the Cowboys like I did this past week, you lost. But what can we do going forward with them? I don't think it's going to get better for them. They're nearly a pick 'em off the jump here against the Washington football team led by Kyle Allen. And that tells us, Kyle Allen, Andy Dalton being seen as even comparable, not a good sign for the Cowboys going forward. And of course, Washington, a solid pass rush. You're going to have Chase Young running after Andy Dalton. Good luck with that. If you're the Cowboys, you better hope that Zach Martin can get healthy in a hurry if you want any chance at being competitive in the greater scheme in the NFC. But of course, being in the NFC East, they're just a half a game back of first place in the division, which is incredible given how bad their first 6 weeks of the season have been and the fact that they don't have Dak Prescott there in Dallas. But again, Dallas Cowboys showed some real weaknesses, even worse than what we saw in the first 5 weeks, based off of what they did in their first full week without Dak Prescott at quarterback. They're in real trouble there in Big D. Staying in the NFC East, we also learned that the New York Giants learned nothing from last year, folks. Last year, late in the season, the New York football Giants had a game against the Washington football team. Of course, the Washington football team was not named that back then, but I digress. They had a late season game, and the loser of that game had a real great shot at drafting Chase Young, number 2 overall. New York Giants went out there, and Daniel Jones went ballistic. He lit up the Washington defense. Of course, Washington benefits from that situation. They drafted Chase Young. The New York Giants, they fall back in the draft. They draft Andrew Thomas at offensive tackle, who was benched for part of this game for the Giants and really hasn't been that good. Surprise, surprise, a draft pick with the Dave Gettleman-led Giants not panning out. And here we are back in 2020 with a game between the New York Giants and the Washington football team. And what do the New York Giants do? They get out to a lead, and they end up winning in dramatic fashion. Of course, Riverboat Ron Rivera and the Washington football team, low-key brilliant by going for 2 in that situation. And he's saying, oh, we're learning how to win and things like that. If you wanted to learn how to win, you'd put your team in an overtime situation and stress test them against a team comparable to you in skill level. No, what they did is they went out there, they didn't get the 2-point conversion, they lost the game, which will benefit them later on in the draft positioning world. The New York Giants, ladies and gentlemen, have learned nothing from last year as they went out there, tried their very best, and again, worked toward decimating their chances of drafting Trevor Lawrence or another elite player in this coming NFL draft. And looking bigger picture here, yeah, sure, we're talking about the Giants, but what does this mean for the NFL as a whole? Later in the season, you need to keep in mind which teams respect the tank, so to speak. You look at a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New York Jets, who have made it very clear we are going to get rid of assets. We are going to get rid of them in the middle of the season, before the season, whatever it takes to put out a team that is not on par with the rest of the league. And of course, the players are out there playing their hardest because they have jobs that they're trying to win down the road. But if you're betting on the NFL, keep in mind the New York Giants, they're going to try their hardest the whole season, and they've put out just enough talent to tank their own draft stock. Whereas teams like the Jets and the Jaguars, as their seasons wear on, I apologize, may be more inclined not to lay down, but to lack that ability to close games late that could end up helping them later on in the draft. As again, the Jaguars, the Jets, Washington, apparently Minnesota is in the mix as well for that number 1 draft pick. You never thought you would have said that at the beginning of the year. But again, a lot of bad teams out there. You have to understand the motivations of each one as a bettor as the season goes along. And the New York Giants, a perfect example this week, as they proved, again, they are too stubborn to put their future interests ahead of their present interests. What else did we learn in the NFL in Week 6? We learned, folks, it's Tua time. Tua Tagovailoa took the field for the Miami Dolphins this week in the late stages of their shutout victory over the New York Jets. He completed 2 out of 2 passes, or Tua out of Tua passing for the Dolphins this week. And of course, now you have the announcement from Adam Schefter, Tua is going to be the starting quarterback after the team's bye week this week, replacing Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that'll start with a game against the LA Rams. Now, a couple of things here. Number one, you feel bad for Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? Miami should not be a 500 team right now. They've played a pretty tough schedule. And of course, they're just the Miami Dolphins, plain and simple. Ryan Fitzpatrick brought them to 500, and that deserves a lot of respect. And you do feel bad that he is now going to take to the bench as, I guess, a really sad reward for everything he's done in this early part of the season. To me, I understand the bye week timing, but let him revert back to the old Ryan Fitzpatrick before you bench him, because you know that's coming at some point. It always does. But let him go out there and play well for a while before you do that to him, in my opinion. As for Tua, again, interesting timing. His first game will be against Aaron Donald and the Los Angeles Rams. Aaron Donald, arguably the best defensive player in the league, arguably the best defensive player in the recent history of the league with how he dominates the interior of the defensive line. Interesting timing. You worry about the health of Tua taking on a team that can get after the quarterback so soon. You hope it works out. Of course, we'll look at the lines next week when they come out for those games in week 8. But for now, Tua Tagovailoa will be the starter, and you might want to consider as better. Dolphins have been playing really well. You love the culture with Brian Flores, everything he's cultivated, but they might take a step back now that they're integrating a new quarterback into the mix. They might not have a full playbook at his disposal quite yet. Keep in mind, Tua did not play any preseason action because there was none this summer due to COVID-19. So do we see a little bit more of a vanilla version of the Dolphins at first? Do they try to ease him into game action? We'll find out. But again, keep that in mind before you make any decisions about the Dolphins and the Rams in a couple of weeks. And finally, what did we learn in week 6? I'm going to say it every week. Don't bet big money lines, people. DBBM, don't bet big money lines, because this past week we had another one fall. This time it was the New England Patriots. The Patriots were a double digit, around 9 for a while, favorite against the Denver Broncos. Of course, big money line. What did they do? They lost outright. They lost outright to 6 field goals from Brandon McManus as the Broncos beat New England 18-12. This coming week, you have the Bills, a huge favorite against the Jets. It was up around 13 this afternoon. You also have the Chargers, over a touchdown favorite against the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. There are better bets out there than big money lines. Do not put them in a money line parlay. I'm anti-teaser as well. If you want to, at least if you want to put them in a teaser, make sure you're getting through a couple of key numbers, but don't recommend those either. Again, just so many better bets you can make out there. Of course, that's very rich coming from me, given the week that I just had. And let's talk about that week in a segment we like to call Upon Further Review. This past week, I went 0-4, all spreads in the NFL in week 6. For the season, drops us to 15, 14, and 2. So if you took everything for the same amount of money, you'd be down 0.16 units according to my math. Just putting it out there. Let's talk about where I was wrong to start the week. And of course, the answer to that is everywhere, but let's get specific. First, you had the Vikings getting blown out by the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings, this was an interesting one because you could have made the argument that, yes, the head coach bump, Dan Quinn being gone, could boost the Falcons a little bit. I overvalued the home field advantage for the Vikings. They've been putting up points in bunches at home, but didn't come to fruition against the Falcons. You had the Colts, didn't cover against the Cincinnati Bengals. My handicap on that game was the fact that Indy, great defense, taking on a team in the Bengals. Joe Burrow, not impressed with the way he's played so far at all. He racked up 150 yards in the first quarter. Cincinnati went up 21-0. Of course, Phillip Rivers had to throw in a turnover in the first quarter to help them get an easy touchdown. But Colts dominated the game from there. They don't get off to that abysmal start. Could be a totally different situation we're dealing with here. Of course, my bad for trusting Phillip Rivers not to commit an early turnover and torpedo a big number. That's on me. Next up, Panthers losing outright as a favorite to the Chicago Bears. This is a game where I thought, and I guess I was correct, that the Chicago Bears would not contribute much on the offensive side of the ball. And that's exactly what happened. Nick Foles was unimpressive. The team as a whole really didn't do much on that side of the ball. But my goodness, Teddy Bridgewater struggled. And of course, Khalil Mack did contribute to that. The pass rush did contribute to that. But even when he wasn't rushed, he struggled with his accuracy a little bit. And the running game never got going for Carolina. They lose a low scoring game, and that was that. And then finally, I took the Cowboys over the Cardinals. We talked about that. I did not think there would be that severe drop off from Dak to Andy Dalton. Of course, you expected there to be some, but what you don't expect is a couple of Zeke fumbles. You don't expect everything else that could have possibly went wrong going wrong for the Cowboys. You did expect the defense to give up some points, but I thought they'd keep up with all the weapons around Dalton. That just did not happen whatsoever. So that is where we were wrong. 0-4 for the week. 15, 14, and 2 for the 2020 season. We'll look to build it back up as we go along here. Of course, where we were right, that is going to be the shortest thing we do all season because, well, that's it. That's the end, folks. There was nothing, and that's okay. We live and we learn and we try and get better this coming week. Of course, if you want some better sources of information than this guy, use betql.co for all your NFL betting data needs. Over 10,000 simulations of each game each week and projections that tell you where there's value against the spread, where there's value in the totals, money line, everything else you need to know as a bettor. Use promo code Sanin for 20% off all subscriptions at BetQL to beat me this coming week in your NFL bets. Now, let's do something that we did a few weeks ago. We'll revisit it here. It is the updated GBI show power rankings. A couple weeks ago, we gave you our top 10, which of course was led by the Kansas City Chiefs after they demolished Lamar Jackson on Monday Night Football. That was the last time we did this. So we'll update the rankings for you. And of course, like we did last time, we'll talk about the bottom couple of teams as well. I won't bore you with the middle 20 teams, but I will tell you the New York Jets still convincingly at the bottom of the power rankings. Jacksonville Jaguars have moved into the second to last place position, and then the New York Giants right above them at number 30. So that's the bottom three. We're not going to bore you with numbers 29 through 11. Let's get right to the top 10 here on the GBI show. Number 10, the Buffalo Bills. Of course, they were number 3 the last time we did these rankings. They just lost 26-17 to the Chiefs. Kind of positives and negatives here. Of course, the weather made it very difficult on both offenses. Josh Allen really struggled. And the last couple of weeks against playoff caliber competition, you got to be concerned with what you've seen from Allen, especially since before that, you were thinking, wow, this guy could possibly win the MVP award. It's very interesting the way that he's kind of fallen off here in these last couple of weeks. But we'll see if he can get back at it. Of course, a big get-right game for Josh Allen this coming week, as he is one of the Bills that is a 13-point favorite against the New York Jets on the road this week. Again, temperatures are going to start to get cold. The weather's going to start to get bad here in New York. So you can't use that as an excuse for Josh Allen anymore. Now, on the other side of the coin, you can say, wow, they held Patrick Mahomes to 26 points. And of course, they'll get Matt Milano back at linebacker. So we'll see if they can improve. But again, for now, you got to be a little bit concerned if you're the Bills, as they do slide quite substantially in our power rankings all the way down to number 10. Number 9, we have the Green Bay Packers. They were just outside the top 5 last time. Of course, they lost 38-10 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. And, obviously a bad loss. Anytime you score the first 10 points in a game and then you get blitzed 38-0, not a good look. However, we saw a similar performance from the Packers last year that has me less than worried about this particular game. We saw last year, they went to LA to play the Chargers and they got absolutely demolished. It was around November of last year. They played the LA Chargers on the road, and there was kind of some scandal that came out of it. People were alluding to a lack of focus and things like that without any real concrete details as to what was going on. And they got demolished. Same situation here. They got killed by the Bucs. Of course, I don't know what to make of the Bucs because they have a solid defense. They're ripping teams up offensively, but I just don't know if I trust Tom Brady when the weather gets cold and he's going to have to travel to these cold weather teams late in the season. Either way, I'm not too worried about what I saw from the Green Bay Packers here. This next week is going to be a big test for me. Second leg of a 2-game road trip taking on the Houston Texans. Can they overcome the adversity created by this last game against the Bucs? That's the real question for me coming into this week for Green Bay. For now, they sit at number 9. Number 8, the aforementioned Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Bucs, again, amazing game here. 38-10 over the Packers. Tom Brady slinging the ball over the field. Ronald Jones. We talk about all these running backs that the Buccaneers brought in this year. Leonard Fournette, LaShawn McCoy. It's been Ronald Jones carrying the load, and he has been fantastic on the ground for the Buccaneers over these last couple of weeks. See if he can keep that going. But for now, the Bucs, again, huge win. Can you back it up this coming week? That remains to be seen. Of course, they have an interesting trip to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders on Sunday Night Football this coming week. By the way, how excited must Al Michaels be with all the years he's talked low-key about the spreads and the totals at the end of games? How excited must he be that the Sunday Night Football crew gets to go to Vegas for a game at long last? But we'll see if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can win on the road against a Vegas team that, by the way, has given some teams some trouble at home already this year. We remember on Monday Night Football, they beat the Saints outright, and they did give the Buffalo Bills some headaches for a while as well. So we'll see if the Tampa Bay Bucs can continue to rise up the rankings. For now, they sit at number 8. Number 7, NFC West team, the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, the Cardinals, 38-10 over the Cowboys, an absolute bludgeoning. Kyler Murray, dynamic on the ground as you'd expect. One thing I'll say about the Cardinals, though, you got to see Kyler Murray do more through the air. He did not look in sync with DeAndre Hopkins this week. It should be very difficult for a professional quarterback to have trouble connecting with him, who might be the greatest receiver we have in the game right now. But they did take advantage of a weak Dallas defense. They got into the end zone plenty. And of course, they stifled Andy Dalton as well. I do think the loss of Chandler Jones will hurt them in the long run. But so far, high marks for the Arizona Cardinals, who, despite being in the toughest division in football, look like they could very well contend for a postseason spot here if all goes their way later on in the year. They sit at number 7. Number 6, a team that lost this last week. We dropped the New England Patriots down. I had the New England Patriots 3rd in my power ratings as of last week. They dropped down this week to number 6 after losing outright to the Denver Broncos. You could argue they should be lower after this game, but here's what I'd say to that. Some extenuating circumstances on the New England Patriots end this last week. They lost a ton of practice time due to their facility being shut down due to COVID-19. And by the way, credit Bill Belichick, who was not mandated to close the facility for all those days. However, he did it out of an abundance of caution, regardless of what you think of the COVID-19 situation. Hopefully that keeps the Patriots healthier later in the season so we don't have more situations where Stephon Gilmore, Cam Newton, and other key players are exposed to the virus. And of course, Cam Newton did not look good this past week, but he did just bounce back from COVID-19. So we'll see if he can get better as the week goes along. For now, the Patriots at 6. We did not dock them too much for what was kind of a weird couple of weeks for their franchise. Number 5, an undefeated team, the top team, at least right now in the AFC standings, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers demolished the Cleveland Browns this past week, 38-7. They made Baker Mayfield look like an absolute fool. And of course, the offense continued to build a rhythm as weapons like Claypool, Smith-Schuster, clicking with Ben Roethlisberger, who looks great to be the comeback player of the year. Of course, people saying Alex Smith as well. But in terms of his actual output in the comeback, Ben Roethlisberger by far has been the most impressive returning player this season. Big test for the Steelers this coming week as they take on the Tennessee Titans in a game that we will talk about in just a little bit. Number 4 in the GBI Show Power Rankings, the second ever edition of the GBI Show Power Rankings, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans had a wild schedule these last couple of weeks. Of course, they played last Tuesday against the Buffalo Bills, and then they played this Sunday against the Houston Texans. They won both of those games, and they put up a ton of points in both of those games. They blow out the Bills, and then they win 42-36 over the Texans in an overtime affair back on Sunday. Now, I'm a little concerned with the defense of the Titans, and we will again talk about them in greater detail in a little bit. But Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, and now A.J. Brown, now that he's out of the COVID situation, a really, really good trio down there in the AFC South. Kind of reminds me of the old Mark Brunell, Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith trio in Jacksonville, if we're talking about AFC South teams, where you have three really good players at those three positions who, again, they don't get a lot of name recognition, not a lot of star power there, but all three of those dudes absolutely get it done. Big test for the Titans this week as they take on the undefeated Steelers in week 7. Number 4 in the power rankings. I'm sorry, that was number 4, the Titans. Number 3, going to be the Seattle Seahawks. And now the Seahawks, they are off a bye. The Seahawks finally got their bye week. And before that, of course, running up and down the field at will, scoring on everybody. The problem is going to be the defense for them as well. Just like Tennessee, 2 really potent offenses, not great on the defensive side of the ball. And that's why they're at 3 and 4, as opposed to potentially 1 and 2, despite their great performances so far this season. Number 2 in the GBI show power rankings, going to be the Baltimore Ravens. They earned the number 2 spot despite the fact that they were at number 1 for me last week. When we did the rankings here on the show a couple of weeks ago, I did have them at number 2. So they'll stay there. And again, this is a team that you know is going to be tough in the regular season. That's why I keep them high, even after a loss to Kansas City. I'm always going to keep them high in these rankings because you know they're a team that's going to come out there and punch you in the mouth all regular season long. They lost a tight game. They won a tight game against the Eagles this past week. Again, that's what dropped them from 1 to 2, in my opinion. But you know, this next week, they're going to come out. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to get out on a team, going to get out to a lead. And the question is whether or not they can hold it. I love what the Ravens do with the running game. The question always with them is going to be, can they do it when the games matter most? We haven't seen that yet. It remains to be seen if this is the year where that changes. Number 1 in the GBI show power rankings. Of course, that means there's really only one realistic option. It's back to the Kansas City Chiefs, ladies and gentlemen, as they defeated the Buffalo Bills in a rainy, not New Era Field, but now just Bills Stadium in Orchard Park, 26-17. And you got to like a team like the Chiefs who can go out there and do it in bad weather. Patrick Mahomes was still making plays, getting out of the pocket, extending, finding his receivers on the run, even in those less than satisfactory weather conditions. That's a good sign, as later in the season, we all know cold, we might see snow. Those are things that the Chiefs need to be able to do. And they did. They did a great job. They made Josh Allen look absolutely incompetent in that game. And we know he's not, based on the way he's played through the first 6 weeks overall. So kudos to the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, we'll see if they can keep it rolling during the next few weeks until we update the GBI show power rankings once again. Now that we've gotten through our power ratings, it's time for what you're really here for. Your week 7 early action, ladies and gentlemen. And this week, we are going with our Tuesday pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers, -1 against the Tennessee Titans. Now, we have these teams 4 and 5 in the power ratings this week, but there's something that most NFL bettors, the casual fan especially, is not going to think about when they place a bet on this game. That is the offensive line of the Tennessee Titans. They just lost left tackle Taylor Lewan, arguably the best player on their team, to a season-ending injury. He's gone for the season. And it's unfortunate because, again, he truly is one of the greats at his position in the NFL. That does not bode well against a Steelers team that is number 1 in the league in sacks this season. They have sacked the quarterback 24 times through the first 6 weeks of the season. And of course, it's worth remembering that they missed a week. They had kind of that unplanned bye week as a result of the whole Titans COVID situation. So you now have a team that has 24 sacks in 5 games, almost 5 sacks a game, taking on a team without its starting left tackle. That is a huge loss for the Titans. And of course, that's exacerbated by the fact that the Steelers can stop the run as well. The Steelers, second in the NFL this season in yards per carry allowed. They're only allowing 3.3 yards per rush attempt this year. So you have a situation where the Steelers can stop the run, force third downs, force the Titans into passing situations, and then the Titans, without their left tackle to protect Ryan Tannehill, are going to be shorthanded trying to stop arguably the best pass rush in the NFL. That's a recipe for disaster for the Titans offense. Of course, we talk about the Steelers' ability to stop the run. Well, who have they done it against, you might ask? These last 2 weeks, they played against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cleveland Browns, who are third and fourth in the league in yards per carry gained this season. So they haven't done it against teams that just refuse to run the ball or run the ball really poorly. They have shown they can stop the run against quality rushing opponents. Now we'll flip the sides here, and we'll talk about the Tennessee defense as well, because the Tennessee defense, in terms of their yards per play given up, one of the worst in the NFL. They're bottom 5 in that regard, tied for 28th in the league. Only 2 teams have an actually worse number in terms of their yards per play allowed than the Titans this season. Those would be the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Atlanta Falcons. So that tells you what kind of company they are in so far this season defensively. And we've seen it these last couple of weeks. Ben Roethlisberger connecting with Claypool, connecting with Smith-Schuster, the running game doing some things as well for this Steelers team. I think all of this lines up to being a bad matchup for the Titans. We got it early at -1. It's up to -2 or so now. Either way, I think that the Steelers, especially with all of the love that the Titans have received over these last couple of weeks, I think that them playing 3 times in less than 2 weeks, about 12 days instead, catches up with them here, and the Steelers get the job done. So that's your week 7 early action. And ladies and gentlemen, that is your GBI show for this Tuesday. It has flown by. Thank you to everybody who checked in this week. Of course, thank you to Nicholas, who checks in asking what happened to the Colts. Of course, I feel terrible because he took all 4 of my losing NFL picks this week. But don't worry, Nicholas. You take the Steelers this week, and you take the rest of my week 7 picks. Hopefully, we get back on track this week. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Things will get better, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the World Series, whatever else you're doing until Thursday. Until then, good luck on your bets, and we will see